GM, and welcome to Moloch Traps, our new podcast here at From A to Z. I'm Z-Fi, this is Zombie Shepherd, and we're excited to be bringing you this new show in collaboration with Bankless and its audiovisual team. To be clear, opinions in this series expressed by either of us are our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Bankless at large. This week, we will continue to study and discuss excerpts from the Meditations on Moloch essay written by Scott Alexander. The essay provides examples of multipolar traps, and it delves into various instances from history, biology, and economics to illustrate how competition often results in collective harm. In today's episode, we'll discuss the concept of arms races. Let's start with Alexander's words on this dangerous example. Arms races. Large countries can spend anywhere from 5% to 30% of their budget on defense. In the absence of war, a condition which has mostly held for the past 50 years, all this does is sap money away from infrastructure, health, education, or economic growth. But any country that fails to spend enough money on defense risks being invaded by a neighboring country that did. Therefore, almost all countries try to spend some money on defense. Now, from a God's eye view, the best solution is world peace and no country having any army at all. But from within the system, no country can unilaterally enforce that, so their best option is to keep on throwing their money into missiles that lie in silos unused.
Moloch, the stone of war. Moloch, whose fingers are 10 armies.
All right, well, so we're all familiar with this one. I don't think anybody needs us to really walk them through what an arms race is particularly. So there's also a lot of, there's a lot of different directions you can come at this. So maybe let's work it from, without going too historically deep. Let's start at the beginning. I would say agriculture.
Hey, here we go.
Agriculture gave us the need to defend a certain territory. Like, obviously, people were still fighting in hunter-gatherer societies, but you really don't have the ability to stockpile arms or stockpile violence until you have the ability to stockpile food.
Right. And once you have that stockpile of food, you've got to defend it so that all of your extra, your surplus, your hard work doesn't get stolen by the neighboring tribe.
And that's also a big thing that you hear about throughout historical, like wars, why wars were lost and won and things, is usually comes down to supply chain issues. So that tells me right there that supply chains are a big part of war, period. So agriculture started it all.
Hooray.
In that sense, at least what we think of as the typical arms race, not necessarily war and violence. They didn't, war, they don't have a monopoly on that yet. That's when the state gets formed. But so you can see how a farm or a society that has land needs to have the better weapons and the better army in order to be able to defend that land. And so like this technological race to, kill more men with less energy is kind of where it gets into, when science and the Industrial Revolution enters into it, is when we start to see this like, scientific trade-off where basically like, before that, really, you only had fire and arrows to really...
Rocks.
Oh, I just mean these are things that could kill more than one person at a time.
Oh, I see, yeah.
You got a sword or a hammer or an axe. Good luck trying to kill like multiple people with that weapon.
That's 1-on-1, 1-on-2. You're talking melee battle at that point.
Right. Now you got an army of archers or you got like flame. You got the ability to throw fire with a trebuchet and things like that. Well, now all of a sudden you can kill more men with one shot. And so I feel like, you start to get into guns and, the original guns, you just shooting one at a time. Obviously, that wasn't going to do it. But as soon as you start having a person who's got the ability to shoot 6 times, now all of a sudden that one person can kill multiple men. And so that's basically the arms race we've seen throughout history in this like increase of weapons and strategy. But as you get into the technological age, it's not really about strategy as much anymore because, like
I
nuclear
would say that it
bombs.
is, but it's not the specific strategy of killing people with the least amount of energy. The strategy more becomes like control and power.
Yeah, exactly. So what I mean is like the actual strategy of war then becomes, well, which infrastructures am I going to bomb? You know, and where can I attack? Then you get into like, post World War II, where it's like, where can I attack without killing innocent people? Like, because before that, you didn't care who you killed. You killed citizens, you killed everybody. Like, and
Take a city, rape and pillage, burn it to the ground.
yeah, I mean, that was the, honestly, and that's funny because, yeah, that was kind of the reward for being in the army, in the empire's army, was like, oh yeah, you get to do all the raping and pillaging you want. Like that was a fringe benefit of the job. Like, so, and I think that's why it's kind of funny that people have this thing where they're like, they actually will deny that like people who become police or become military don't have a tendency to want to be violent. Like, why else would you go into these fields? It has historically been a place that you go to if you want to do violence with impunity. Work for
That's
the
where
state.
the violence and the power is centralized by structure.
Right. And so like, oh, I get a pass for killing people if I go here. That's why a lot of people do it. And you can't like deny that part of it. So when you get to nuclear war, that is when you really start to see like, all right, we have reached maximum potential to kill everyone on the planet if we so choose.
That's the ceiling.
We've literally reached the ceiling. This is the Malthusian trap of, wait, we've created weapons that are that can kill in greater numbers than we have.
Yeah.
So,
Yikes.
yeah, like the ability to kill has now outstripped by orders of magnitude, the population that we can supply it to be killed with.
We're at the point of just because we can doesn't mean we should,
Right.
But we can with a lot of things.
The U.S. Obviously is the only country to do this, and then basically says, all right, well, nobody do that anymore. We've done it. The thing has happened. We know we can do it. So you better just give us dollars.
Let's all agree never to do it again.
But the thing is, yeah, let's all agree not to do it again. This goes to the fish farming story. It's a bunch of people in the pool that are like, well, you already did it. So I'm definitely thinking about doing it. And you can't make me not think about it because you did it. And so then the arms
That's Iran. That's North Korea.
Well, even before that, it's just Russia and China.
Yeah.
And so
the nuclear arms race specifically, driven by the Cold War, was intentionally like, we know that we don't want this. We don't want to see these weapons be used. So the race was for a mutually assured destruction process where, hey, if one goes off, they're all going off. So let's never send any of them. Which, I mean, I'd rather have that than let's just use them as soon as we make them,
Right.
But at the same time, that arms race then becomes who can waste the most resources the fastest for the longest period of time. Right. The Cold War was initiated intentionally to break the back of the Soviet Union, trying to keep up with the United States.
Right.
Because at that point, the United States had way more surplus that they could direct toward these arms races than the Soviet Union did. So it's just like, it's a race to waste.
Absolutely. And, this is definitely, so like the Cold War, even though it was posed about being about nukes, it was about two economic situations. Capitalism had to defeat any form of communism. And the
nuke was the threat.
At any cost.
The ideology was the key.
The nuke was the threat, and it's also why they created the CIA. The CIA, and it's funny, this is another one of those funny, like, cognitive dissonance things where people are like, the CIA was doesn't disrupt people's governments and and totally cause Venezuela and other countries to fall through interference. They don't do that. They were created to do that. Like, that's exactly why the CIA was created, was to make sure that any country that was under civil unrest and could fall to communism didn't. That is exactly their job. So it is totally crazy for people to say that's not what it does. That's why it was created during the
That's
Cold
its
War.
job.
That is its job. So it really was about the spread of capitalism more than anything. It wasn't about democracy, because the CIA installed many undemocratic leaders in previously democratic countries just to regain control of that country and making it act in a certain way in accordance with whatever global pacts we were making at the time. So here's another controversial part of that I think that people might not agree with, but it's certainly something I've thought about a lot in context of this, anti-socialism, pro-anti-socialism argument in the US especially. People always point out countries that were previously communist or socialist and them failing. And then I've just really thought about it a lot. I'm like, these countries failed because of embargoes. These countries failed because the point was to cause them to fail. We've never actually had anyone be able to try socialism or communism or any other form of Marxism without capitalism literally seeing if it could break the back of that country any way possible, whether it be through direct interference with military or indirect interference with the CIA. And so, or direct interference with embargoes and
Economic sanctions, whatever the case might be.
exactly. So when you literally cut countries off from the entire world and slowly chip away at all the countries that are on the in team and the out team, you can't actually say that there was a fair shot at those things trying. We've never actually seen anyone get a fair shot without imperialism in some form coming and trying to break the back of that project and make sure that it can't work.
That's just the underlying code of capitalism. If there's another project doing something better or potentially threatening in some sort of a way, you take advantage of the situation, you capitalize on that difference.
And it's also the Malthusian trap, because it's, we're reaching a peak in our country and we need yours. We need your country to get on board with our system, because if not, the system's not going to work. So you try to break that country through force. And that force might be economic, that force might be, war. But I think that's what we're seeing more and more, is that as we've gone through these arms races and now we have the ability to kill anyone at will in any numerous ways, it's almost like the war is no longer about violence. Now the war is about infrastructure and capital. It really does come down to breaking the back of your country via dollars, and getting you on board with our global economic thing. And the thing is, it's worked, because the USSR fell. It's not, they needed to get into this capitalist structure to get food on the table. And, China willingly pivoted, with no problem in the 70s. They just turned into a capitalist nation with communism at the state level, capitalism at the federal level. So, and they're playing the game better than we can. Why? Because they're all on the same page for whatever reason. Nobody's saying that that's they're an altruistic country and their citizens just love being Chinese citizens and that's why they're all on the same page. But it doesn't matter, because they're all on the same page. They're not tearing themselves apart with civil war the way that the United States is. And if you watch any things about the rise and fall of empires, it's always ending in civil war and currency debasement. And the country that's coming up does not have internal struggles of that nature, and their currency is on the rise. And you could look at that as China, or you could look at that as Bitcoin and Ethereum. You could say these are nations who are on the same page with a rising currency, and it could be outdoing that other currency that's on its way out the door. So I think the economic part of it is big, and I'm just going to pull up a chart here, because when we talk about how much resources are not going towards infrastructure and public goods and its citizens at all, we see that on this chart, the United States is spending 877 billion on defense, and the next
Per
biggest
year.
spenders per year, and the next 10 biggest spenders are spending 849 billion collectively. That means in order for us to even, the way I read this is, in order for the United States or the dollar to remain the petrodollar, it costs us $877 billion a year. Otherwise, the world wouldn't listen to us.
That's the gas cost for the dollar system.
And that's it. And so what is propping up the dollar? It's not trust, it's violence.
It's the defense industry, yeah.
Yeah. And so 877 billion is such a huge number. It is, I've got some stats here. Let me get my notes ready here. So let's see. It is 12% of all federal spending and 50% of all discretionary spending. So 12% of the written budget and 50% of the time that we open our wallet when we're not supposed to, it's for the defense budget.
That's pretty telling.
Right.
It seems extreme.
And the defense budget is allowed to just reach in the wallet 50% of the time. Like, we don't ask, it just happens. And right, like you can argue about where the money's going all day long, and that's not really the point of this context or this show, but we know it's going towards defense, whatever those expenses are. And we can say that 344.4 billion of that went to private contractors. So that's close to 40% of the entire defense budget is going into private industries, not even being used by the military itself directly. It's not like this is going to pay and feed soldiers. This is going predominantly to private industries who are then paying CEOs millions and billions a year. So, yeah, how much of that billion that we're paying out is just directly going to some arms dealer's house? Literally.
Makes you wonder. Definitely makes you wonder. And I don't know, I think I'd come across this number, but I don't remember what it was offhand. But the percentage of our spending that goes towards just operational maintenance, the overhead, essentially, of the system that we've created by spending so much, it's a sizable portion going to just maintenance.
Right.
That's maintenance of missile silos that we hope never to use. What happens when the next arms race is in, AI drone swarms? And
right.
Nigeria, without a missile silo program, starts diverting their military spending into optimizing for that system. Now they have the advantage of not having to spend, $500 billion a year on an outdated system, in addition to also trying to participate in that arms race.
Another scary thing about this with the arms dealers don't care who they sell to. So they're selling to us. They're making 344 billion on us, and they're also making billions on other countries too that might be our enemies. They're not just selling to our friends, they're selling to our enemies. And even if they're not selling to our enemies above the books, I promise you they've got a off brand that they sell. Whatever the B company is, they probably own that too. That's just how we see this stuff going. And I guarantee you, if we're seeing monopoly in energy companies and cable companies, there's definitely monopolies in arms companies. Sure. I'm pretty sure that they've got something to back that up, because also private armies, mercenaries work for people. So, and the other scary part about it is they're not just selling to other countries and our enemies. They're actually turning our police forces into military forces against its own citizens. And you are
That's scary
literally
stuff.
putting arms that are meant to kill armies in the hands of police to use against citizens. And in a lot of ways, why are those weapons being sold to the police? Well, not just because obviously greed, you want to make more money, but the other big reason is because war is not the same as it used to be. Soldiers don't need machine guns.
It's a lot less people using machines in, a one-on-one person versus person thing.
Well, you got to sell it. You got to sell it to consumers and police forces. You sell all the citizens AR-15s. Well, the police are going to need better than that, right? And they're going to need body armor and tanks and
It's like a mini manufactured arms race within your own country just to drive dollars. Just for the production, for the sales.
Just for the production of weapons. And you can see that we have been propagandized as a country to love war and to love violence and love guns.
120 guns per person. No, 120 guns per 100 people. That's what it is. More than one gun per person in this country.
Damn, I thought you were being fatuous at first. Jesus. Yeah, so exactly. We are totally mired up in this for the capitalist reasons of just sell, 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 sell. We don't even need these weapons anymore. But where we do see our arms race going now is obviously, I said already, in capital. We're seeing debasement of currency. We're seeing this playing games with money. That's one way we're fighting each other. There's cyber attacks. We're seeing cyber attacks. North Korea is the king at this one. We think, most crypto hacks, we think are going back to North Korea. There's been, a lot of crypto hacks that happen. People think North Korea is doing it. And it's certain hacker groups that are government sanctioned hacker groups. But it doesn't even matter. In a country like that, you might have private militias who are still it's kind of like when you think of things like the Taliban and other things in the Middle East, these small organizations that then become armies and governments because of U.S. intervention helping them do that. But but in a place like North Korea, I would imagine that North Korea's police state can't deal with all of the insurrections that are going on in North Korea. There's got to be little cells of organizations that are conducting, for good or bad, they're conducting rebel actions,
I see where you're going. Statistically, it's probable. But I think this ties back into that dictatorless dystopia idea where, if you're found doing any of that stuff, the government will just disappear you. And it's so enforced by tradition that people expect that it will happen with certainty.
Right.
So they avoid it. They just keep shocking themselves.
You just keep shocking yourself because if not, everyone will beat you to death. Yeah, very true. And then beyond that, so we have to worry about this. There was Russian hackers during the 2016 election, or during it wasn't the presidential election. There were some state level elections in 2016 that were interfered with by Russian hackers. And then we have, the whole political disinformation machine that was fueled by Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. But we're pretty sure the people actually using that information were Russian state operatives that were intentionally creating division between the left and the right. So a lot of the memes that people were proliferating were started by Russian actors, North Korean actors, and even, we weren't thinking about this much at the time, but AI. There was definitely AI intervention in those things going on.
At least bots, at least automation.
At the very least, the algorithms. And no one thinks about social media algorithms as AI, but they are. Some of them are built in similar fashions, inscrutable matrices and whatnot.
And they're only going to get more complicated, more powerful, more connected.
Right. So that is the current thing we're dealing with, is like, what happens if North Korea or China or Russia hacks into the water system of an entire, state, or an entire
Right.
huge, if you hit the wrong dam upstream, like, what if the Asian carp in your town, like, what if they just managed to turn off those electrical grids, and now Asian carp is able to invade the Great Lakes?
No bombs sent, no nonsense, no foot soldiers, no troops, but you've just collapsed an entire ecosystem and destroyed multiple industries
With 1 0 to 1
indirectly.
blip.
Yep. Yep. With an invasive species that's just at this electrified gate that you could turn off.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's at all connected to a computer, someone could turn it off from thousands of miles away.
So then, in a way, our current arms race is compute. It's all chip power. It's bandwidth in terms of just internet bandwidth, and then computing bandwidth.
So how do you defend against this? Well, right now it's just people. We just have people that are going to check the code every day and make sure there's been no breaches. This is what OPSEC does. You just check for breaches every day. Hey, is the fence still there? But you don't know until somebody's in the fence what's happening. Maybe you can see certain levels of people trying to get in. You can go, oh, people are trying to get in here. You can see certain pings or whatever that are showing you a weakness, or at least what people perceive to be a weakness. But realistically, if you want to defend from this, you're going to create AI that does it for you. You're going to create better and better cybersecurity AI, and so is the enemy. And now you're going to not just create cyber defense AI, you're going to create cyber offense AI. And now we're training.
The tools are agnostic. People are going to use them for whatever they want.
And the thing is, so say you're the US and you don't want to train offensive AI, well, guess what? Your neighbor will. North Korea will. And that's the scary thing about this.
And if you don't, you won't be ready for it when somebody else does.
And that's what we're scared about with AI alignment is, well, we want to create good AIs, but how long till someone creates a bad AI? And what if it's not us? Now we are forced to create the bad AI first. And that's the AI race right now, the AGI race, where whoever reaches AGI first wins the AI game. At least that's the zero-sum story that we've been told.
I think there's even a step before that too. Before that, like selecting the clear winner of the AGI race, there's still like drone swarms. This is where most of the world's militaries are focusing right now. They're all based on existing AI. They're all running on algorithms. They're all running on sensors. We don't even need AGI.
Well, they're currently still human driven for the most part, right? But I guess we're going to have a human fully AI. Yeah,
exactly. At this point, we have a human saying, "Send a drone swarm."
Oh, they're self-driving drones.
There you go.
Someone has to keep their hands on the wheel, but they're not doing anything.
Right. We got to tell them where to go and be there just in case. But they're running essentially, they're communicating amongst themselves to target certain locations or buildings or individuals. Swarms are scary, and we don't need AGI to be implementing those. So it's really just, how do your guns talk to the other guns?
Right. And I mean, it's totally like you end up there with the drone thing specifically and the AI thing at all. Like, you end up with the same nuclear arms race, except 100,000 times more dangerous, because this thing is more intelligent than human beings by the time this happens. It's like, essentially, we're ants compared to this thing once it truly breaks out.
And we don't need this, with the nuclear arms race, our deterrent is like, we really don't want to see nuclear fallout. We don't want the, hundreds of years of radioactive destruction that will linger after our, one money-making event. With drone swarms, you don't have to worry about that. The pressure to not start a drone swarm war is not the same as the pressure to not start a nuclear war. You can send in a drone swarm, level a city, and there are zero consequences long term.
Right.
You just repopulate the city next week.
Right, because it's small size bombs. Yeah, exactly.
And no lingering radiation, no lingering biochemicals. It's just execution.
But what's scary too is that when you're putting these things in AI and you end up in the Doctor Strangelove situation, um, in this, it's a Kubrick film, and in the film, not to give too much away, but essentially, like someone decides to launch a nuke and tell everybody, runs it up chain of command, and everything is being done the way it's supposed to be done, which means that the the plane who's supposed to drop this nuke on Russia is supposed to go radio silent, meaning they don't get any more transmissions once they get the order to go. So now nobody can stop them. And with this thing on the way to Russia, Russia is now launching nukes at the U.S. And this is the big scare: is that, like, well, once it's in the air, nobody can stop it. Once it's on the way, now we're just living in a dead world for however many long minutes it takes before the bombs start dropping. And AI can do this same trick on us. And I think this was even done in a Terminator movie where, like, basically, like, the nuke started launching because AI told it to, but like everybody thought it was somebody else doing it. The Russians blame the US, blame the Chinese, blame North Korea, blame whoever.
But when they're in the air, it doesn't matter who did it. Launch yours or you don't get to use them.
Right. And so now maybe AI only shot one bomb, and that one bomb is enough to make humans set off the rest of them. And it could have literally been a mistake, or it could be that it's an intentional.
Could even be a glitch. Could be a blip. It could be signaling that something has launched, but not actually launched.
That is the scariest thing about AI, and the scariest thing about ceding control of weapons to AI. In the AlphaGo movie, AlphaGo is the AI that was able to defeat the world's best Go players at the time. It was the first AI to really become basically maybe not undefeatable, but pretty damn good at playing Go. And people thought it wouldn't be possible. And this is like 12 years ago now. So, but in the AlphaGo documentary, it starts playing poorly at one point, and somebody's like, is there like a bug in the code? Is that what's going on here? And the guy's like, yeah, of course there could be bug in the code. If we could write perfect code, that would be a bigger story than an AI that can play Go. So yeah, the point being, like, this code can't be perfect. And what if you find out, like, in a sense, a bug in the code of an AI, or more importantly, in an AGI, is essentially the equivalent of mental illness being built into the system.
Or a backdoor.
Or a backdoor, or whatever. It could, yeah, but like, given the complexity of AI, it's almost not a backdoor, because we don't, like, the people who created the things barely know what they're doing in there anymore. So it's less likely a backdoor to a human and more likely a backdoor to another AI.
Right, a potential exploit.
Right. And so that is dangerous to think that we've already got everything. The scary part is we can't go back, because we've already got a large number of our infrastructure under computer control, and leaving it under computer control without AI security will actually make it more at risk than putting AI security on it. Because if you don't, someone else will. And if someone else can get an AI into your computer system and you don't have one there to protect you, boom, you're in trouble. So the AI and the AGI is the next big arms race. And, we can get onto our closing thoughts here, but I'm just going to, like, leave some trails for the future. And that's like, beside AI and AGI, we're talking about that right now. Things we're not talking about right now: nanotechnology, synthetic biology, the entire
human biological, like Bioshock.
Right.
I'm forgetting the word right now, but like bionics, I guess, when you start putting machines, and especially internet connected machines, into the human physical body.
Right, exactly. So and then, I mean, another one actually that is present right now, if we're going to talk about AI, we also need to talk about compute and processing and chips. So this is another one where, like, having the best processors, having control of the chips and the processors and where they're going, is actually another supply chain issue when it comes to that AI war.
That compute capability is what determines who gets to AI first, who gets to nanotech first.
And how much money you're dumping in it instead of your citizens,
that last bit there, instead of your citizens. It hurts, but it's true. Because if you're investing in arms, then you're not investing in healthcare.
Right. And we also want to believe that the US is ahead in this AI game. Like, we think we're so far ahead in AI that we could take 6 months off for alignment and still be ahead of China. Hey, maybe that's true. I don't know. But I think that any perceived gap will quickly be like knocked down. Like, that's a perceived gap. And um more importantly, I think that the reason people have that perceived gap is because maybe capitalism and private markets have made AI a lot of money right now and it's booming. So we think it's very far ahead, but it is also competition and privatized industry, not for the good of the people. And so if someone like China is working on this, they're going to have a lot more cohesive product and end goal because they're going to have the best minds in that country working together on Chinese AI, as opposed to competing in an open market. And, like, we're already seeing how the cryptocurrency markets and technology is stifled in the US due to regulation. And so I don't think that I think that this totally disproves the myth that like free market capitalism gets us the most innovation, when in actuality, like, everybody working together will get you the most innovation, even if that everybody working together is at the threat of death.
The other thing with that is, if the Chinese government or another state is doing this type of thing, this collaboration among the country's best and finest minds, they're doing it in secrecy. Whereas public companies in the United States all have to be auditable to certain extents, and you have to, you're beholden to your shareholders and all these other things. There's more exposure,
There's
more
a lot
publicity.
that's public.
There's more at the surface that everyone on the globe can know and see, versus
Right.
stuff that's happening, behind closed doors.
That's absolutely true. If you don't genetically alter your citizens, okay, so like when I say genetically alter, it's kind of like what you're saying with the bionics, or like even down to nanotech and these other things. And I think the problem in the US is that we aren't on the same page and we are having a civil war with our own citizens at like the individual level, at the household level, even at the social media level, because we don't take care of our citizens. And that's what everyone feels like. It doesn't matter your political
Right.
alignment. You feel like the government and the corporations have completely abandoned us.
Well, they have.
Yeah,
Our system doesn't optimize for people, it optimizes for capital
right.
at the expense of people.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is that we don't have any loyalty. Like, why would I be loyal to a thing that will let me die? It has no loyalty to me. I don't care. And so you don't care whether or not, like, people think that the fear of, China or Russia taking over is like enough to keep people who are already dying or can barely afford to pay rent, like, under this flag. Like, you really think that, like, when the alien thing came out and people were like, "Oh, there's really aliens," people were like, "Are they going to take over the government?"
Yeah, when?
Like, okay, so like, have they seen what you're doing to us? Because like, we literally are at the point where we're like, please, somebody do something about our overlords, and we're,
Right.
you know,
Or the fear is shrugged off, like, oh, aliens are coming. What are they going to do? Ruin our planet and turn us into slaves again?
But my point just being that there's no loyalty to the nation state. There's no loyalty to any of these things because they're not taking care of us. And so this thing about like genetically altering your citizens, like if a country like China decides to start making super soldiers and decides to start making citizens that have, you know, like, okay, for instance, Elon Musk is doing the Neuralink thing. Like, okay, so if I have 50, 60, $100,000, I can get this thing, but China's going to just start putting it in people that volunteer.
Yeah, they don't need that profit. They don't need the 10 layers of middlemen profit motives. They're in it for the end goal.
When you start to make people who are, genetically altered, bionic, whatever you want to call it, these different levels of increased transhumanism, um, in a private market, a private market will lose that war because you have to let people buy it. You have to let people want that thing enough to save up for it in a system that already doesn't pay them enough to eat. And so you
And
have
make the device or whatever it is, the service, profitable enough to sustain its creation and the creation of like items.
So in this way, like making it a business actually decreases your likelihood of winning the race because you have all these hurdles in a business that hold you back actually from innovating because yeah. So yeah, I think we're still very much in arms races. It feels like we're in a stalemate in a lot of ways, and that the U.S. has won. But the U.S. has won because it has dollar hegemony, and it's spending more dollars than everybody else to have the biggest military. The problem being that when you're also debasing your currency, $877 billion is no longer worth $877 billion. It's now worth closer to $600 billion or $500 billion, depending how much they print. And so when you think about it like that, you're like, oh, wait, so our $877 billion isn't necessarily equal to the $849 billion over here because they're not measuring it only in dollars. They're measuring it in other currencies, which are currently not doing any better than the dollar because as the dollar plummets, it's dragging everything else around down with it because everyone's using it for oil as the petrodollar and as the world reserve currency. And I think that's why we are seeing the increase in popularity with Bitcoin and Ethereum, because these are things that don't run down with the dollar. They only run up against each other. And right now, I think the big holdback in cryptocurrency is that we're still thinking about it as dollars.
We're pricing it in fiat.
Exactly. And when the dollar dies, we will price Bitcoin and Ethereum against each other and against other real resources. We will suddenly, food, oil, green energy, whatever the thing is going to be, we're going to measure it against that because the dollar won't be there. And that is what people say when they say one Bitcoin is worth one Bitcoin. We don't argue about the value of a dollar. $1 equals $1. It's not until we've gotten into this realm of cryptography and cryptocurrency that we've actually really, on the citizen level, been able to discuss money and capital and how money works. This is the first time in history we've been included in the conversation and not kept out by the capital controllers.
Right. And I think that's a good thing for obviously many reasons, but even just the sole factor of that anti-fragilism. We're not globally reliant on one single centralized fiat standard base currency. Now there's a basket.
It's the decentralization of thought. We can try different monetary policies and see what works. We have Bitcoin, we have Ethereum, we have Solana, we have Cosmos, we have all these different things that are trying to attain some level of moneyness. Although Solana and Cosmos are not, they claim to not be money. Whatever. My point being, we can have these monetary conversations, like with Bank token and with Avagachi, like there's tokenomics to discuss. And even if all these things lead to is an enlightenment in how money works, that's better than what we've had for the last thousands and thousands of years,
right,
where we're not allowed to talk about money. We're not allowed to be in how these things function. And honestly, centralization of economics is what causes empires to both grow and eventually fall.
Indeed. So our challenge now is we can see trajectories, and how do we implement new tools and new systems to escape those trajectories?
Absolutely. And I mean, as we keep saying over and over on this show, it's about coordination.
It is all about coordination. Yeah.
Coordination of all humans on the planet. We really need to be thinking about not what's just beneficial for the US, but what's beneficial for China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, all the
And
countries.
the biosphere. Take the humans and the economics out of it. If we don't have a biosphere that's livable, none of this shit matters.
Right. So human coordination isn't an us versus them problem. It's an we're all in this together problem.
We finally now, as a planet, I shouldn't say finally, we are facing a stack of huge issues that need global collaboration to solve, or none of them will be solved. I don't think we've ever faced a situation like the one that we're in, with the trajectories of all these systems, both biological, economic, geopolitical, all these systems we've designed are collapsing simultaneously. But I also don't think we've ever been at one of these cyclical civilizational collapses with the tools that we have today in terms of collaboration, communication, the ability of humans to connect quickly and get things done quickly has never been as heightened and as extreme as it is right now. So it feels hopeful that if this is one of those civilizational cyclical collapses, we are more prepared this time than ever before to make it through.
Right. If
That's
we can
encouraging.
coordinate. Yeah. And
But we haven't had the tools ever to do it. I think now we have the tools to coordinate. We just have to do it right.
right. No, you're absolutely right. Getting everybody on the same page should be easier now than it ever has been throughout history. And I think another thing is, I don't think we're just at the end of an empire. We might be in the middle of a mass extinction. And the ability to survive a mass extinction relies on us coordinating and cooperating. And that is very like against what we said in the Malthusian trap, where we're like, we're rich, we have everything. There's no way we're near at the end of the world, but like that's because we do have the technology, we have everything, and we're literally stomping the gas and headed towards the cliff instead of like figuring out how to use all this stuff to survive together.
And to have all those things, we're burning through our substrate that creates those things. We're just going through our resources that are meant to last forever for those short-term production gains.
Yeah, so that's the challenge. And I think we've often talked in sci-fi especially, there's often this idea that humans will never coordinate until we have something to fight against. It's going to take aliens or AI, it's going to take Terminators and all this other stuff.
Climate change, I hope.
Well, I think that Moloch might be that thing. If we all think about Moloch as an enemy that we need to fight, and the only way to fight Moloch is actually to become a cooperator on the individual level, you actually have to embody the values of not being Moloch. And we should actually get into this in an episode, but B. Pete's had a great thread about how much pressure we put on this idea of Moloch and how much we think about Moloch, but we never think about the antithesis of Moloch. What is the god of coordination? What is the god of bringing this all together? What can we, what gets us to touch grass?
Yeah. It's a good question.
So we'll think about that more in future episodes, and we'll definitely probably have to reference that B. Pete's thread at some point, because it was good stuff, and it was right as we were releasing the first episode was coming out, and he put that thread out, and it was like, oh man, this is great.
Perfect timing. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for watching today's episode of Moloch Traps. We hope you enjoy this series. Today was about arms races. But as always, none of this is what we say is legal or financial advice, and we encourage listeners to do their own research in these areas before making any related decisions. Don't start any wars or fights, though. That's good advice.
I can get behind that.
If you find our content informational, educational, or entertaining and would like to support us, please collect our episodes on Lens. 18% of the proceeds go back to Bankless DAO. 2% supports LensTube for hosting our videos, and the rest helps to make From A to Z production possible. To stay on top of our weekly series, subscribe to us on the Bankless DAO YouTube, and don't forget to like and comment while you're there. We will see you next time, friends.